everyone. Just a quick note before we begin today. I'd like to go ahead and give a huge thank you to Miss Creepy Tales for joining me on today's episode of the Creepy Fox podcast. She'll be narrating story number 4 today. If you'd like to hear more of her scary stories narrations, then please check the pinned comment down below or the link in the video description, as you'll find the link to her YouTube channel there. She's a wonderful narrator, and I know you're going to love what she has on offer. So friends, with that said, make sure to sit back, relax, grab some snacks, and let's dive into these scary road trip stories. Enjoy! I found your Creepy Fox YouTube channel on the video recommendations of Disturbed Reality's Funky Town Gore upload, and I see you've covered people's scary encounters with the cartel. I have something that happened to me that was very horrifying relating to the cartel, and it's pretty graphic, so I do have to give your listeners a bit of an advisory before I begin. For privacy reasons, all names have been changed. With that said, the last summer, 2022, I went to visit family in Mexico and Sinaloa for summer vacation. It was just myself, since my parents were really busy with work. One evening after dinner, my cousins, who we will call Marcos, Antonio, and Jessica, and myself, took a small road trip approximately 45 minutes out of the city limits to head to this lake we often frequented when we were younger. It's really off in the middle of nowhere, and you do have to do a bit of off-roading to get to said lake, but the view it offered was gorgeous. We pulled up to the lake right around sunset, and with the back of my cousin's truck open, we took out some drinks and just chilled, listening to the music on the radio. I would say about 20 minutes in, having laughs and talking about the past, I had to take a really bad leak. So I decided I was going to walk over to a tree closer to the lake to relieve myself. As I got closer to the lake, this bad stench entered my nostrils that almost made me throw up. Now, we had gotten a bit of a whiff where we were parked, but we assumed it came from the lake, thus we thought no big deal. I could now see and hear the sound of flies, and when I peeked the corner of the tree, I saw something that to this day is engraved in my memory. This is your final warning for those of you who might be a bit squeamish to gory details. This is where I highly recommend you turn down the volume. Okay, so are you ready? Well, I found a body completely dismembered with guts spilled out, and the head was nowhere to be found. This is the point where I actually threw up, and I instantly screamed over to my cousins in absolute panic. Guys, there's a body here. We need to go, now. They thought I was pulling a prank on them, and what do you know, morbid curiosity has them walking over to see what I had just found. My cousin Jessica fainted at that moment, but we caught her before she could fall to the dirt below. When she came to, we walked her back to the truck, and we decided we needed to leave, and leave now. We packed up her stuff, and we leave. Fast forward about a week later, we were in the living room watching the news, and there was a story about how various dismembered bodies had been found in that same area, the same lake that we had been hanging out at. And what do you know, it turned out that those responsible were the Sinaloa cartel. Well, what do you know, we all looked at each other, and we genuinely almost broke out in tears. We thought, what if we stumbled into the Sinaloa cartel while we were out there? We had no idea about that lake being cartel territory, let alone where they had been dumping bodies. All those what ifs, even today, keep me up at night. Also, who was that poor soul I found that evening, and who were the others? They never did say in the news report, and while I have no plans to visit Mexico anytime soon, I feel for my family and those who do live in Mexico. Just the amount of violence they see in their daily lives and on the news is crazy. The cartels in Mexico are no joke, and I really agree with the statement one of your subscribers stated in a previous Cartel Stories video of yours. Almost none of this gets talked about here in the United States, and it's sad because a lot of the overdoses that take place here usually come from drugs that are supplied by the cartel in Mexico. Obviously, I talk about things such as fentanyl overdoses. It sucks because there's almost nothing that's done by the Mexican government. They won't do much to stop the cartel problem. It's probably because they get bribed to turn a blind eye. Anyway, that is my scary story for all of you today. If you are planning on visiting Mexico anytime soon, please make sure to do your research, and please make sure to stay safe. I was in the 3rd grade, and this was during my summer vacation in the year 1997. My dad had made plans for us to go visit my grandparents in the state of Texas. We are from Washington State, so it was quite a drive for sure. For context, it was just myself and my dad on this road trip, as my mother had recently passed away at the time. So anyway, we were in the middle of nowhere, Nevada, and we spotted a rest area coming up in about 10 miles. I was in desperate need for a pee break, and so was my dad. And so when we pulled up into the rest area with a gas station and some fast food joints, we immediately run inside to do our business. Well, it turned out that my dad actually had to go the other one. I mean, number 2. Sorry ahead of time for those who eat and listen to these scary stories on the Creepy Fox podcast. What other way could I have possibly said this? It's not like I'm an expert writer or anything. Now, this is important context because it meant I was going to have to wait for him to be done, which I did wait outside the restroom door for him. I stood there for approximately a minute and I got really bored, and so I decided to walk around the little store a little bit. Maybe I could grab some snacks for my dad and I to eat on the road. When I walked over to the refrigerator section, I bumped into an average ordinary man in his late 60s, early 70s, who gave me a smile and a wave. I did the same back, as not to be rude, and then I went to open the fridge to grab myself a Sprite. The man now asked me, "Hey there, little one, where's your mom and dad?" I got a bit teary-eyed at the mention of my mother, but I snapped out of it pretty quick and tell him my dad is in the restroom. The man nodded and noticed my tears, and he asked me what was wrong, to which I said all was okay, there was just something in my eyes. I actually could tell that he cared, as he then said, "Well, when your dad comes out of the restroom, I'll buy you guys some snacks. How does that sound?" It sounded pretty nice, so the man tells me he's going to wait by the front counter and just to go get him once my dad was done. Well, my dad was taking a super long time, and what was about to happen in these next moments would traumatize me for quite some time. I was now in the aisle of chips, with the front windows right next to me, and no joke, when I looked through said windows, I got immediate chills. There is a person wearing all black attire and a ski mask like you see in the movies, running up to the gas station store with his hands in his pockets. At that age, I'd seen enough movies with my dad to know that this was some very serious trouble. Well, what do you know? Almost immediately, as I hid behind a display, the man pulls out a gun and points it towards the clerk and the man I just met, telling them not to move. Adrenaline was now starting to pump in my veins, and I started to hold back tears as I made the decision to move. Risky, but this would open an opportunity. In my effort to escape the danger, I had accidentally knocked over a small display that I was hiding behind. The man with the gun, I overheard him saying, "Who's back there? Come out, or I'll shoot you." About 5 seconds later, there were 2 gunshots, and then I heard somebody fall to the ground and moaning after that. It sounded like they were in pain. My God, my first thought was, I just caused this guy with the gun, the one in the ski mask, to shoot one of these innocent people. But then I heard the familiar voice of the man I just met, as well as my dad's voice. "Are you okay? You're not hurt, are you?" I heard the man I just met saying. Following that, he tells my dad, "Your son is back there by the chips." I'm pretty confused at this point, and I was wondering just what the heck was even happening, but I can hear the cashier just fine, and that stranger I met. Well, what do you know? I witnessed firsthand the results of what had taken place. Now, even though my dad was doing his best to shield me from viewing the results, Right next to the front door was that guy in the ski mask as he's laying flat on the floor moaning with blood beginning to ooze out of him. No way, I thought. But how? Well, I would get my answers when the police got there roughly 7 minutes later. We spoke with the police, as did the good guy with the gun, and as I would learn from the clerk, who told my dad his point of view, me moving and causing a ruckus changed everything. It turned out that the guy in the ski mask, when he said, "Who's back there? Come out or I'll shoot you," turned his attention away and the gun for one too many seconds. In that time, the guy I met pulled out a gun of his own and shot the man in the ski mask. That explained it all. Well, I do wish I had more details to share with you, but we ended up leaving and we continued on to my grandparents' house. That's why I wanted to share my story here with the Creepy Fox family. Anyone who lived in Nevada, in the Reno area, remember any sort of news article, or maybe even a news report about a guy shooting an armed man inside a gas station in the summer of 1997? I greatly apologize for not having the exact location other than outside of Reno, as I do remember we stopped there for food. But who knows, maybe someone out there might have information. Maybe ask some family or friends who might know. It would be great to get answers. We never did go back to that gas station, as we took a different route to get back home. Lastly, to that good guy I met with a gun, you had balls of steel, my guy, to react in such a quick fashion under such stress, and to make a decision on how to handle things. Wow, is all I will say. This happened to me in March of 2009 on my spring break. I was driving back home from visiting family in Kansas City, and I made a quick stop at a McDonald's to get a bite to eat. Nothing too special, just a hamburger and a soda to help quench my hunger. Now, I would use the restroom before I continued on, but about 2 hours later, now in the middle of the countryside, the urge to pee had come back again. There was no chance I was just going to pull up to the side of the road to do my business. So I look at my GPS, and luckily there's a rest area approaching in roughly 15 miles. It was quite a stretch, I'll tell you that for sure, but I would make it my mission to marathon my way inside the stall with no distractions. Bear in mind, at this point it's about 6:45 p.m. The sun is almost set, and the sky is a mix of purple and orange. It's just enough light to see, but also not the most ideal for seeing things around you. Anyway, one other vehicle was parked at the very front of the rest area, a Ford Explorer, if I remember correctly. Nobody was currently occupying it, so I made the assumption that person was in the restroom. Well, what do you know, as I reach the building, a man walks out of the male restrooms, waves hello, and then walks away. I, for some reason, just stood there, and to no one's surprise, he gets inside the Ford Explorer and drives away. Well, alright, time to go into the restroom, no time to waste. Out of the 5 stalls, I chose the stall that was closest to the door, and as I sat there, I began to hear the voice of a woman from one of the other stalls. This did creep me out, as I made the assumption I was the only one here. After all, there were no other cars at this rest area. The more I listened to the voice, the more I could hear the creepy and frightening things that she had been saying. Things such as, kill her, take her body, eat it. Things like that. I wish I was joking with you, but I'm not. Anyway, I'm finally done at this point, and as soon as I leave the stall and begin washing my hands, I look in the mirror. The last bathroom stall opens, and there's a woman who's slightly overweight, who looked as if she had seen her better days, is starting to stare at me with baked eyes. I gave a nervous hello as she approaches me, and then she whispered, "You're really pretty. Would you like to do some meth with me?" Yeah, she just straight up asked me that. Not gonna lie, bumping into a meth head in the middle of nowhere at a rest stop was not on my bucket list. I told her thanks, but no thanks, as I begin leaving, but she now grabs my wrist and pulls me back towards her. I don't like people who say no to me. In these moments, I saw her fiddling around with something in her jacket. I freaked out at this point, and I pulled my arm away, now booking it out of the restroom with a purpose. At the same moment, I saw an SUV pulling up to the rest area. Now, just imagine their shock, seeing and hearing me scream like a banshee in pure fear. Well, that wasn't the scariest thing about this whole thing. You see, when I turned back to look for a brief moment, now in the safety of my vehicle, I saw the crazy lady had taken out a knife. She now ran up to my vehicle and now started yelling at me to come out and to stop being so chicken and to speak to her, that she was just messing around with me. By the way, that SUV that had arrived had now driven off, not that I could really blame the driver. At the same time though, part of me was thinking, well, thanks a lot for sticking around to help me. Anyway, I don't know what came over me, but I decided not to drive away. My big fear was that some innocent family might drive up to this rest area in the dark, and now that it's about to get dark, I wouldn't want them getting attacked by this crazy lady. I drove a safe distance away from the restrooms, and I kept an eye on the building as she went back inside. I waited for the police, going against the recommendations of leaving. Now, before the police got a chance to get there, the lady came back outside, and she appeared to be talking on a cell phone. I kept my eyes on her, and wouldn't you know it, a van, which had all its windows tinted, drove into the rest area and then up to her. She got in, and they drove off, where I would never see them ever again. Now, remember how earlier I said that it was getting dark and it would be hard to see things? I couldn't make out the license plate, and the picture I got with my cheap cell phone camera at the time was of no help. All I had to go off of was a description of the woman and a generic model and make of the vehicle. I spoke with officers who showed up, but unfortunately it is sad to say I never would learn the fate of this random lady, who she was, why she was in that restroom, presumably doing meth, and why she came after me with a knife. That all remains a mystery. Any sort of advice I could give to all of you, if possible, avoid rest stops in the middle of nowhere. You just never know who you might bump into. Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Just a reminder, go ahead and look below the video player and just make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. The reason I say this is because a lot of subscribers have been getting unsubscribed by YouTube. It's been a really common issue here, and I'm always getting a lot of comments regarding it. I know a lot of you enjoy these episodes, but then you don't get notified because YouTube either doesn't notify you or they unsubscribe you. But yeah, if you are somebody that has been unsubscribed from the channel, go ahead and leave it down in the comments section below. I want to go ahead and gather as many of these comments as I can so I can bring it up to YouTube support. I know that's already pretty difficult to get into contact with them, but you know, if we raise enough noise, maybe they'll fix the issue. But yeah, anyway, let's go ahead and continue on with these scary stories, shall we? Here's Miss Creepy Tales narrating the following scary story. Surrounded at a rest stop in the middle of nowhere.
Before my final year of college, I decided during that summer break, this being 2003, that I wanted to go on a road trip across the United States. I would use this opportunity to see the various landmarks and even visit some family and friends along the way. For context, this story comes from the perspective of a female who at that time was 22 years old. One day on this road trip, I had woken up super early, about 5 a.m., and by the time it was 8 p.m., I was super exhausted. At that point, I was in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, with the next city not being for at least 50 miles. I was going to just deal with it and drive, but I was struggling to stay awake. No coffee and no sleep does that to you. Well, lucky for me, there was a rest area coming up in a few miles, so why not park there and take a little nap? I'll be up before you know it. As I reached the exit sign that would lead me to the rest area, I noticed that it's just one small building with really cheap lights. Next to the building, off in the field behind it, was this medium-sized rock-like formation. It was about 1 story tall. At the building where the restrooms are, I could also see a couple of vending machines. I made sure to park right next to the restroom entrance, and when I stepped out, I swear to you, I almost stepped on a used needle. That was the last thing that I needed happening to me, especially in the middle of nowhere. At this very moment, I ended up hearing a noise. It sounded like footsteps shuffling and running off, if that makes any sense. I turned my attention behind me, alarmed by this sudden disturbance, and I stared off into the night for a solid 20 seconds. Hello? Is someone there? But there was no answer. Well, that didn't help, so I just made the assumption that it was the wind moving the trash that scattered all over the floor. And thus, I returned back to my vehicle, water bottle in hand. Thankfully, I now felt a little more safe, but still very exhausted. I sat there in my seat for about 15 minutes, trying to keep my eyes from shutting and debating if I should just leave. But before I knew it, darkness hit me and I had drifted into dreamland. Well, this sleep wouldn't last very long since I was suddenly awoken by something scratching one of my windows. What do you know? One of the scariest sights for me to ever bear witness to. There were 3 large men surrounding me, one on my driver's side, the passenger side, and I could see one in the back through the rearview mirror. The one on my driver's side door has a large knife, and he's trying to open my door by pulling at the door handle. The one on the passenger side has a handgun, and the one at the back has a baseball bat. Hey, open up, sweetheart. We just want to talk to you. I still recall the one with the large knife telling me, as he keeps trying to convince me to open the door. As you'd expect, I wasn't just going to sit there and allow these random creeps to try and break in. Any sort of sleepiness I had was instantly zapped away as I turned my car on and started to drive away. However, since they were still pretty close to me, the one with the baseball bat hit the back of my vehicle in retaliation for me almost running him over. I obviously had a loss of words now, but I am somewhat relieved that I had gotten away. However, that relief would only last for 20 or so seconds, because what do you know, I can see headlights fast approaching me. It wasn't a random stranger's vehicle in the area. No, it was these creeps who now caught up to me. They drove right alongside me and now I can see their vehicle a bit better. It was one of those typical creeper vans you see and hear about in people's scary stories. The one guy on the passenger side window, I remember him pointing his gun at me and signaling for me to pull to the side of the road. Well, what other choices did I have? I could do just that, or drive away and risk getting shot at. I had to make a decision quickly, so what I did was I said I'm going to put pedal to the metal and floor it as fast as I can, which in itself was already a super risky move. I pull off a Vin Diesel and I start driving upwards of 90 miles an hour, almost approaching 100 miles, and before I realized it, I had lost those creeps. Well, I didn't stop even at this good news, as I continued on until I reached the next town and drove over to the police station to report the incident. They did tell me that they would look into it, and while I did stay in town to get my car fixed, I would return back to the police station to see if there were any updates before I left. They had none, which is such a shame. From that point on, I chose to spend some extra cash and ensured that I stayed in motels and well-populated places. And by the way, I still believe those creeps who tried to break into my car must have been watching me from the cover of the darkness at that rest area. Remember, I didn't see any vehicles at first, and it wasn't until they got closer to me that I could see the kind of vehicle they drove. I still believe that they must have hidden their vehicle behind that rock formation that I had seen, and I also believe the footsteps I heard weren't the wind like I first assumed. It was one of them trying to sneak up on me. They must have changed their mind at the last minute and then chose to hide. I know this had to have been the wrong place at the wrong time, and they chose to come after me when they noticed that I was asleep, and that in itself is just terrifying.
I was taking a nap in a southern New Mexico rest area at approximately 6 p.m. during the month of October. Reason I was here was because I was on a road trip to see family, but I needed a break to stretch and catch some Z's. The rest area is just a small parking lot, if you will, with a giant field behind me leading into the desert and a little building with restrooms and some lights. I was all of a sudden interrupted when I hear banging on my windows along with screaming. Just imagine that in the middle of nowhere. I was outside of Roswell, so first thing that comes to my over-imaginative mind is beings from outer space. But this wasn't something like that. It's this crazy, disheveled-looking guy with a backpack on his back, no shirt, and ripped-up pants, going on about how he's being chased by the government and they were going to kill him. Basically, I was able to come up with he's either on drugs or mentally ill, maybe a combination of both. Regardless, I started thinking, how the heck did he even get here? Maybe he had been hitchhiking and got dumped here. Not sure, but with my window down just a tiny hair to speak to him, I told him to chill and that he's going to be okay, but that doesn't seem to do much. Please, let me inside your car. I need your help. They're after me. Absolutely not, I say. I told him I could stay in the area, however, and call the police so they can help him, but he just straight up says, "No, don't you dare call the police. They're in on this whole thing." Yeah, this guy has officially lost his marbles. So once more, I ask him if I could call for help. I don't know why I said this again, and in this process, he reached for something in his backpack. Dude is literally packing heat as he pulls out a gun and then starts waving it up in the sky. I wasn't about to get shot out here in the middle of nowhere, so I did what any sane person would do. I drove out of there and called the police. And as anticlimactic as this might sound, that's pretty much all there was. I don't know who the heck that guy was, how he got there to begin with, and why he decided to take out a gun. I did reach out to the police department about a week later to ask for any kind of updates, but they told me that they had none, but were still trying to look for him. This was over 10 years ago, and nothing, so it's safe to assume he either got away or maybe he got help, but I don't really know. I just thought I'd share this scary experience of mine for the Creepy Fox podcast. So anyway, take care everyone. A warning on the following story. Some details in this recollection may be a bit disturbing to some listeners as they contain details of sexual nature. A listener discretion is advised on this one. This happened in November of 2011. I was on a small road trip heading to my best friend Amy's house since she would be getting married the following day. I still had another 4 hours to go to get to my friend's house, and with it being lunchtime and me being hungry, I stopped to grab a bite to eat at a Carl's Jr. at around 2 p.m. It was super packed there, not really a surprise, and while there was the option for me to grab some Chinese food nearby, I was more in the mood for a hamburger and french fries. I finally got my order 20 minutes later, and I took a seat outside under the shade at one of the tables. There were plenty of kids running around, moms and dads talking, and just this overall sense of peace and quiet. Now, what should have been max 40 minutes of waiting and eating looking at my phone turned into well over an hour of listening to music with my earphones in. I only noticed the time when I felt a hand on my shoulder, followed by this really bad stench. It was like a mix of rotten eggs, smelly armpits, and alcohol as well. I looked up from my phone, now seeing there's hardly anyone around anymore, and what do you know, I'm facing this strange, creepy homeless man. I said hello to him, moving away from him in an awkward fashion, and he now proceeded, I'm not even kidding, to grab my arm, and then straight up started to rub and caress it with his dirty hands. I freaked out, pulling my arm back, not even knowing what kind of sick diseases I'd just been exposed to, and I yelled, "Get your hands off of me, you sick pervert. I'm calling the cops." His face turned red, but I think it was more from excitement on his part than from pure embarrassment. Honestly, this guy was disgusting. He responded to me by saying, "Oh, come on, I know you like that. I can touch you in other places that'll make you feel real good." And I tried so hard not to barf and lose my lunch at that point. He then placed his hands on his crotch, trying to unzip his pants. But at that point, I started to run away to the entrance of the McDonald's. Thank God somebody inside, my luck it was a big buff guy, saw what happened and came over to me. Crazy homeless guy stopped in his place. His pants were now thankfully fully zipped up. He stopped and tried fighting this dude. For reference, the homeless guy was about 170 pounds, 5'8". I myself am 5'3", 120 pounds, female. The big buff guy was about 6'3", 260 pounds of pure muscle. Needless to say, he tackled the creep to the concrete as cops were actually already pulling up into the area. It actually turned out that somebody had already called the cops just a few minutes before, as he had been harassing some people and trying to break into cars. Anyway, I gave my side of the story to the cops, and I'm so thankful they took the whole thing very seriously because they put the guy in the back of a police cruiser and they drove off. The rest of the trip, although quite tarnished by that creep, would turn out to be a lot better, and I forgot about it by the time I got home. I look back at this experience now, and I hope it can remind everyone out there who listens to Scary Stories narration videos. Please speak up if you're in danger, make a bunch of noise, and wave people down if you need help. Also, times are not like they used to be. Please, seriously, I mean this, please stop looking down at your phone when you're out in public. Creeps like this prey on those who aren't paying attention to their surroundings, and it's just sad, but true. So learn from my mistakes and apply them to your daily life. And most importantly, please stay safe out there. Summer of 2001, middle of nowhere, Ohio. I was on a road trip on my own, and I had to stop to get some gas in a rest area. It's one of those locations off the highway that has said gas station, a small convenience store, and fast food restaurants. There was one other person who was pumping gas, and when I walked into the convenience store to put some money on the pump, I bumped into a crazy-eyed looking man who reeked of pure hatred. I'm not sure if it's just me, but I can usually sense when someone is going to give me attitude, and for almost no reason or aggravation whatsoever. Well, what do you know, he starts yelling at me and saying that I was cutting in front of him, to which I responded, "No, I wasn't. I'm still going to get snacks." It's only him in this line, by the way. I think he mistook me walking in front of him and then taking a few seconds to look at the candy bars on display as cutting. As not to further escalate some random nonsense, I tell him, "Yeah man, you win. Now I'm going to get a move on." That wasn't enough to quench his anger. He starts to call me a bunch of things, saying, "You're a bad woman this, and you're a bad woman that." He basically reminded me of one of those crazy guys, the ones who get rejected by someone who don't share the same feelings when that other person never even did anything to lead them on. The clerk tells the guy to relax and that she, that being me, is not looking for any sort of trouble, and basically crazy guy tells him to F off and that he's not talking to him. I was feeling quite scared at this point because I'm a petite 25-year-old, 5'2", 120 pounds, female, up against this over 6 foot tall, I'd say around 250 pound, male. I told myself at this point, screw it, I'll just pay by credit card and get snacks somewhere else. I turned my back for a moment to walk away, but I put my hand in my purse to grab a hold of my pepper spray. Well, what do you know? Crazy dude has the nerve to grab a hold of my free wrist tightly, and at this moment, it's game on. I spray him directly in the face with that pepper spray, and dude lets go so fast, he started screaming and yelling in agony. Served him right for grabbing my wrist so tightly. I actually had a nasty bruise from how much force he used. The clerk looked at me, and I looked at him for a brief moment as he realized the spray was justified. I now run out of the store, starting to dial 911 as this guy, from what I can tell, heads over to the restrooms. Police would get there about 15 minutes later, and the crazy thing was just as they're pulling up into the rest area, crazy guy comes out of the little store, and now he's got a small pocket knife. He sees me and he starts to head in my direction, but then does a complete 180 when he sees the cops, and they jump out telling him to drop the knife. He does, and they get him into handcuffs, and while the threat was now over, I couldn't stop crying at how scared I was. All of this, mind you, because of his anger issues. Long story short, I would speak with the police, and at the end of the day, I was cleared on my self-defense, and it was considered justified. Speaking of self-defense, I highly recommend everyone out there listening to take some kind of self-defense class, and also arm yourself with protection, a taser, pepper spray, a knife, or even a concealed carry, whatever you think is best fit for you. In 2008, my husband and I took a road trip from our home in Jacksonville, Florida, to drive up to my parents' house in North Carolina for Christmas. We had a lovely time with the family, and it was actually during Christmas dinner that we announced that we would be expecting our very first child. Both my mom and dad were filled with joy, and they couldn't wait to have their first grandchild. New Year's was more fun and celebrations, and by January the 3rd, we were now set to make our trip back home the following morning. Before beginning our road trip back home the following morning, however, I wanted to pick up some snacks at Walmart. This was roughly 7 p.m., and I went with my dad as my husband had just gone to bed, since he would be up at 4 a.m. and he would be the one driving. My dad would use this opportunity to buy a few groceries as I picked out a selection of goodies. Now, the Walmart we went to is one I used to go to all the time as a little girl, and what do you know, it's pretty much the same way I remembered it, say apart, of course, there being new workers. My dad walked over to the fruits and veggies section, and I went over to the chips to grab some Cheetos and some Lays, the Lays for me and the Cheetos for my husband. As I turned the corner to head over to get some chocolates, looking at the text message my husband had just sent me, I bumped into a large figure, and this causes my phone to fall to the floor. I picked up my phone, apologizing in the process, and when I looked up, there is a middle-aged, overweight man who, instead of apologizing to me, just stares right down at my chest and gets a huge smile. Now, something about myself I should describe is while I am a petite female, I do have large breasts. I'm used to getting people who stare at me, and I won't lie, it is very uncomfortable, and I absolutely hate it. But this guy had no shame, just looking there, and then straight up asks me, "Are those real?" I brushed his perv comments aside and told him to get lost, but he now does something absolutely insane. He pushes me up to the wall beside us, blocks my way, and says, "Want to make some easy money? Let's go back to my car, and I'll pay you more than you'll make in a month." Why at this moment nobody was within viewing distance was beyond me, but I knew if anything, the cameras had to have caught everything this guy was doing, right? Well, I slipped away from him as he now starts chasing me and telling me to come back. I don't know why, but for some reason I wasn't able to scream. I'm sure there has to be a word for it, but all I could do was just run and hope I could find somebody as I looked down at every single one of the aisles. Luckily, I did see a family of 4 looking at some of the toys. They see the look of concern all over my face and they asked me what was wrong and if things were okay. I finally was able to speak up, and so I pointed in the direction I'd just run from. The creep turns the corner at this moment, and when he sees me with this family, he has the audacity to say, "Sorry about this, my wife is being silly. Come on, dear, let's go home. The kids are waiting." He tried to grab my hand, but I move away and the dad of the family tells the guy to get lost or he was going to throw hands. Mr. Walmart creep finally did back off, but not before giving me this evil stare down and finally admitting defeat. I'm going to be honest, I felt defeated at that very moment and I started to break down in tears, thinking how and why I wasn't able to make a noise or scream for help. I think it was just all that fear that blocked those very emotions. I'm not sure. Well, I feel this submission of mine is getting to be a tad bit too long, so I'll just cut to the chase and say that when I finally met up with my dad and I told him about what happened, he was furious. He went over to the security and told them to check the security cameras, and even called the police too. Basically, my dad did everything in his power to try and figure out the identity of this jerk because he wanted to personally teach him a lesson. My dad was at least smart enough not to say that in front of the cops, because I'm sure he could have gotten in quite some trouble. I would tell my husband, and he pretty much had the same reaction as my dad. But sadly, nothing really came up of that Walmart creep, and while we do continue to live in a different state, I can't help but get the chills when I drive by our local Walmart, even to this day. I have no reason to go in that Walmart, but just that reminder of what happened at that Walmart back in my hometown brings back so many creepy memories. Who knew that a road trip to visit my parents would include an encounter with a scary creep at Walmart? I want my story to act as a warning to people out there who go out into nature. It's beautiful, don't get me wrong, but you do have to be fully aware of everything, because one minute it's pure bliss, but the next thing you know, you could be in serious trouble. And so that brings me to this experience of mine I want to share today. It's 2017, summertime in Alaska. We are on a little road trip from Palmer and driving to Seward as we would be visiting my dad's friend for the weekend. It was just my dad and I. It is quite a bit of a drive, but in the summer it's beautiful. You're surrounded by mountains, forest, nature. Just imagine the scenes you see in those documentaries on National Geographic. Well, I want to say it's about an hour before we get to Seward, and my dad and I stop to use the restroom at this old rest area. No one is around for miles, except my dad and I. He heads in first to pee, and after a minute I do the same thing as he gets back into the car. Roughly 20 seconds later, I started to hear noise and my dad yelling at me not to open the door. But why, you might ask yourself? Turns out that at this very exact moment, a large bear is roaming the area and it's getting closer to where I was. I had chills at this point as I started thinking, what if I was on this drive on my own and I hadn't heard anything? Imagine me opening that door and the bear being within inches of my face. Sure, most bears aren't just going to just attack you, but they can be unpredictable. I stayed locked behind that restroom door for what felt like hours, but it was more like 5 minutes, and my dad now tells me the coast is clear and get your butt back in the car. I did, and as we drove away, we see the bear up ahead in the tree line. It's almost as if it was saying, haha, that's what you get. Anyway, that's my little story of the time I was road tripping with my dad and I got stuck in a restroom because there is a bear roaming around by the door that I would have opened. Hey, Creepy Fox here. I thought for the 10th story for today, I'd tell you about one of my own experiences I had. I'm going to do my best to write it out, similar to how all of you share your scary stories with me. Apologies in advance because I'm not some kind of English major. Anyway, this was 2019, and if you've been following my channel, then you know I went to Mexico to do filming for videos in 2018 and 2019. I talked about this experience in the outros of one of those videos, but here it is again, presented in more of a structured story. So my aunt had gotten us rooms in Puerto Vallarta for 5 days. It was me, my mom, dad, aunt and uncle, and 3 cousins. They are around my age. At the time, I was 27 years old. If you want to see any footage of that trip or pictures, I have them in those older videos and on my Instagram. So fast forward to when we're driving back to the city of Colima in the state of Colima. Puerto Vallarta to Colima City is roughly the same distance as Los Angeles to San Francisco. To all my fellow Californian listeners who might know that drive, we ended up stopping by a gas station, Pemex to be exact, because I needed to use the restroom. It was actually kind of my fault for not going earlier when everybody went at the restaurant we had ate at. I walked into the little store and I asked the clerk if I could go and pee, but he says they charge and I needed some pesos. Well, I left my wallet inside my backpack in the trunk, so I returned back out to get it. 30 seconds later, I'm back inside the little store, and when I walk over to the back, I got instant chills at what I saw. There's a large man standing by the restrooms. He has a mini Uzi, he's wearing body armor, and he's got sunglasses on. I've known about things like the Cartel in Mexico, and that was my immediate thought. I'd bumped into one of their members. Now, just a sentence or two to give you a layout. There are 3 doors here. One leads to a back office room, and right next to him are the 2 restroom doors. He was standing right in between all 3, so essentially he was like Snorlax in those old Pokemon games, completely blocking the way. He saw me and said, "Hey, back up. You can't come over here." Bear in mind, my bladder was shouting at me, "My dude, it's time to pee. Tell this guy to move, or get the pokey flute." Well, clearly not when he has a gun. I apologized and I run out of the store, and I remember the cashier had this look like he was about to burst out in laughter. I told my family that there's a guy in there with a submachine gun and we need to leave. My uncle burst out in laughter and then he pointed to the truck just up ahead. I didn't see it since I hadn't read the side of said vehicle. It wasn't a cartel member, but it was armed security. Well, just imagine my embarrassment when the guy with the mini Uzi comes back out with some suitcases and then gets back into that vehicle and leaves. My uncle walked with me inside the small store and the cashier told me to relax and they were just speaking to the manager and making some transactions. He told me at that point, "Don't worry about paying, just go in and do your thing." I did, and we got back to Colima with no problems. So maybe not the scariest thing ever, but if you imagine the context of where I was and seeing this guy with a mini Uzi and full-on body armor staring at you with an intimidating look, you're bound to get the chills, no matter how tough you say you are. Hey everyone, so that was the last story for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed that last story of mine. I really did my best to kind of write it out and kind of present it in a way similar to how all of you send in your stories. Again, hey, I'm not the best writer in the world, I'll admit, but I think I did pretty okay for myself in the presentation of that story. Again, thank you to everyone for watching, and thank you to Miss Creepy Tells for joining me on today's episode. It was a true pleasure to have her on, and if you'd like to hear more of her scary stories narrations, then again make sure to check the pinned comment down below or the video description to go to her YouTube channel. Actually, by the time this video goes up, or maybe shortly after this video goes up, there's going to be a brand new video on her channel that's going to be featuring some stories that I narrated myself for that video, so make sure to be on the lookout for that. As for updates here on the Creepy Fox channel, as I mentioned in the previous outro, do expect to see a Valentine's Day compilation episode. This is going to be me making a full, probably about 2 hours worth of stories. It's going to combine all the Valentine's themed stories we've done in the past. I'm going to go ahead and actually re-record these stories and put them into a big episode for you guys to listen to. This is going to hopefully allow YouTube to push out the video. Usually when I upload compilation episodes, it's funny. I'm not sure why, but anytime I do a compilation episode, the channel usually will tend to grow a lot. Again, I'm not sure why. Maybe it has to do with the videos being longer, so they create more watch time. But yeah, it's basically going to be for new listeners. That'll go up sometime next week, and then the following week, I have 2 brand new Valentine's Day stories. I want to at least have 5. So if you have a story that was either something that took place on Valentine's Day or more or less around Valentine's Day, then please do make sure to send in that story. You can do so using the email that's on screen. It's TCFnarrations@gmail.com. That would be great, so I can give you guys a brand new Valentine's Day stories video. After that, that is the end of this huge increase of stories that I got for Christmas. I did get a few stories here and there before this upload, But there might be a break after this. We'll see. Again, it all depends on whether or not subscribers send in stories. So just that reminder that, hey, we have run out of stories. Let's, hopefully we get some more stories and we can continue on with these brand new videos with no repeats, since I know you guys like videos that don't have repeat stories. But yes, let me go ahead and give a huge thank you to my channel members. Thank you to Robbie, Bo, Spunky the Nutcase, Rice and Beans, Scott, Lind, Maribel, Medu Satil, Silent, Dread Archive, Sean, Jen, Cara Flanders, and Corey. Thank you so much. Thank you, of course, to all the regular viewers who tune in to watch the videos, leave your like, leave a comment, and share the videos with family and friends, and help grow the Creepy Fox family. So friends, that is it for today. I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Creepy Fox Scary Stories podcast. Take care, and have yourself an amazing day.